can start the recording and share the results of our poll with us. All right. Raise your hand if you were excited about the snow. Yay. I think I couldn't figure out how to answer myself, so I did not answer. I don't mind the idea of kind of hunkering down this weekend and letting it come our way, knowing we have a nice long weekend. Who is definitely not excited? Yeah. All right. Well, welcome to our October website chat. I'm really glad you could join us. October is birthday month at the State Library. For some reason, we have a significant number of October birthdays here. So I'm not going to name everybody because I know for sure I will miss someone, but I do want to say a special happy birthday to Rebecca. She's got a birthday coming up in the next couple of days. So happy birthday.
Thank you.
So let's go ahead and look at our rules for engagement. As always, please let us know who you are, where you're from. You're welcome to share questions in the chat. I do try to take pauses as we're going through the content and give you the opportunity to ask questions. Feel free to unmute and ask any questions as well. Mary, you don't have heat yet. Oh my goodness. I hope you can get that fixed very soon. So we've got a number of updates from the State Library Commission meeting updates. We had our October business meeting earlier this week. We want to talk a little bit about the administrative rules work that we're undertaking here at the State Library. I want to share an update about the status of our federal funding and what we know. You probably saw an email about Baker and Taylor. We can talk about that and a few other reminders for your calendar as well. So we did hold our October 8th business meeting in Belgrade on Wednesday. Big shout out to Alina and Kathleen and her staff there at the Belgrade Community Library. It was just wonderful to be able to meet there in their brand new space. What a lovely library. If you haven't been, I really, really encourage you to take the time to visit their new library. And they just really rolled out the red carpet for us at the State Library and the Commission. So big shout out and thank you to Alina and her team for hosting us. I also wanted to just say a special thank you to our Federation coordinators. October is always the meeting where the State Library Commission receives reports from the federations on your activities, how federations spent their grant funds, and it's an opportunity for the Federation coordinators and commission to visit about the opportunities and challenges that libraries are facing. I see Emily saying thanks to Val. Absolutely, thanks to Val. And let's see, I know I saw Sarah Peterson on the in the group of attendants. So Sarah, thank you for being a part of that group. We have just wonderful leadership with our Federation coordinators. As you know, one of the things that the commission is really interested in is the participation from trustees and building trustee engagement. And the commission has allocated $4,000 per federation to try to encourage and create opportunities for trustees to develop their skills and understanding of their work in libraries. And so that was one of the primary focuses of conversation for the Federation coordinators and the commission. I just wanted to share with you some of the great quotes and information that the Federation coordinators shared about the impact that that work is having on increasing trustee engagement. We were really happy to hear, for example, that the number of trustees in the Golden Plains Federation is growing. Their interest and involvement in Federation meetings and trainings is really developing. So we're glad to hear that. We know that it's going to take time for us to really feel the impact of the investment of those funds. And so this is something that I think the state library and the state library is committed to for the next several years to make sure that we're doing all we can to support trustees. It's also really interesting to see how the different federations are using some of those dollars to support trustee engagement. Some of you are aware that a couple of the federations have spring retreats where they can gather and do professional development. Over the last year, we've seen a couple of other federations, Golden Plains and Sagebrush, look at combining some of their funds to bring in trainers. A lot of libraries are starting to use some of those dollars to increase investment in technology that allows trustees to participate remotely and take online trainings and other kinds of ways to use that technology to meet the intent of the funds for trustee development. And then even in South Central Federation, they're starting to have smaller regional meetings to help address some of the geographic and distance challenges that federation has in getting their trustees together. So it's great to see those creative solutions, and we're really excited to see the increased investment from trustees around the state. The commission also had an informational presentation on artificial intelligence in libraries. We have the link in this presentation as well as in the meeting materials from the commission meeting. Gosh, if you are just itching to learn a little bit more about artificial intelligence, if you're a little bit intimidated by artificial intelligence, if you have started to scratch the surface and feel like you're ready to learn more, I highly recommend this presentation. It was offered by Taylor Mormon from Montana State University. She's one of the librarians there and does artificial intelligence literacy work with students. She's also working with faculty from across a variety of departments to help MSU think about what they're doing to adopt best practices in various departments around AI. I learned so much about the importance of considering the kinds of data that is being used in AI and what I can do as a user of AI to make sure that I'm setting myself up for success in using the tools to meet my needs and not being I guess, challenged by misinformation through AI. So I just really strongly encourage anyone to watch this presentation. Our staff are already thinking about how we can make Taylor available for trainings for librarians. I think this is going to be a topic that's going to be very, very interesting to all of you as you think about how to better support patrons in your communities. The commission also then had a great conversation about how they can use AI in their own discussions and deliberations as a commission. So some of that information and conversation is captured in this recording as well. Big thumbs up for Taylor. And besides the fact she's just a really great presenter. She has lots of energy and enthusiasm, and she takes something that seems very complex and really breaks it down and makes it understandable. And her tips were just really, really practical. Looks like some of you had a chance to watch that presentation, so I'm glad for that.
Presentation on
art. Another topic that was on the commission's agenda was about the work between the Montana State Library and the Montana Library Association. We were asked to prepare an audit about what we gain from working through the Montana Library Association, some of the costs involved in associating with them, and information about MLA's worldview. it was just really, really fascinating to take the time and to think deliberately about how much the state library's relationship with the Montana Library Association extends the work of the state library. I really want to thank the state library staff who provided me with feedback as we were preparing to respond to the commission. They shared information about the number of programs that state library staff offer at the conference, and the number of people we're able to touch through those presentations, the number of people who visit us at our state library booth, the importance and opportunity for face-to-face meetings that happen at the conference that really build trust, build those relationships that allow us to work successfully with all of you. We talked about the importance of being able to work with school, academic, and special librarians that we don't often have a chance to travel to and meet. And I really, really loved Bobby's comments about those serendipitous moments when librarians say, oh, by the way, let me pick your brain while we have a chance to be together, or the kinds of conversations that we share around a meal. So that audit is also available through the State Library Commission's materials, but I wanted to share some of that feedback with all of you because it really did warm my heart when I think about the impact we have through that kind of relationship. And we certainly look forward to the 26th conference in Great Falls. There is ongoing discussions with the commission about some conversations that occur with the Montana Library Association around the topic of library neutrality and what it means to serve everyone. I expect to see at our December meeting some discussions around the idea of equity versus equality in who we serve. And I think it's the interest and intent of the commission to create a deeper understanding of what we mean when we say libraries serve everyone. I hope we can reach a common understanding of what we mean when we say that coming out of this discussion. I just want to pause there and ask if there is any questions about the commission meeting that occurred earlier this week. Okay. I did want to take a few minutes and just remind everyone about the important effort that's underway to consider changes to a couple of our administrative rules. The timeline is laid out for you here in the presentation. We are in the middle of a public comment period to consider proposed revisions to administrative rules on the open hours standard that sets minimum hours for libraries to be open, as well as some of the changes to our certification and CE program. We'll get into those details in just a minute, but just a reminder on the timeline. As I said, we're in the middle of the public comment period. That comment period concludes at 5 p.m. on November 7th. As a part of that comment period, we're holding a public hearing on November 3rd. Those will start at 9 a.m. We'll have about an hour public comment period for the open hours standard. And then at 10 a.m., we'll have a public hearing on the administrative rules for the certification program. Those meetings will be available via Zoom. So be sure to look for more information about how you can participate in those public hearings, and also feel free to submit written comments to us at the State Library. The commission will then review the comments that they've received about the administrative rule changes at a work session on November 12th. There won't actually take action on those administrative rules at that meeting. It'll just be a chance for them to consider and respond to the public comments that they received. And then at their December 10th business meeting, the commission is expected to take action on those administrative rules. And then any changes would be notice through the Secretary of State's office, published as new rules in early January of 2026. So that's sort of the timeline we're working under. In particular, there's a little bit extended timeline for the certification program. You can think of it as sort of a two-step process. The first step is making any necessary changes to the administrative rules themselves. Again, that's the process that we're in right now. And then based on any changes that the commission decides to make, we would need to implement new policies and update our certification and continuing education handbook. And we anticipate that that work will take place through the winter and into the spring of next year. So right now we're taking comments and considering changes to the administrative rules themselves. Once we start looking at specific changes to the policies and in the handbook, the commission is also interested in hearing additional public comment about those changes that will come. Looking at some of the changes specifically in the certification program, the current program has 3 tracks. You're all familiar with them for the administrator, the staff, and the trustees in 4 categories of learning, things like administration and public service, technical services, technology, so forth. There's credits have to be verified by the employer or supervisor, and you have to earn 60 credits in 4 years in order to maintain that certification. What is being proposed and what you would see in the changes that will be discussed in the spring are moving to 1 track rather than 3 tracks. There wouldn't necessarily be those categories of learning, but rather a focus on the foundational knowledge and skills necessary to be successful in running and administering libraries. The credits would have to be pre-approved by the commission. The commission is contemplating having sort of a course catalog of courses that address those foundational skills needs that would be approved by them. And then the first certification requirement would be 20 credits in the first year. Renewals would be 60 credits every 5 years. And I just want to reiterate, this level of detail is not what is being considered in the administrative rules changes. However, we think it's important for all of you to have the context for the changes that the commission is contemplating so that you can better understand how the changes in the administrative rules might impact the program going forward as we then think about adopting changes to the policies themselves. Clay, I just want to ask if there was anything that you would add.
No, I think this is a great summary, and if folks have questions about public comments, the contact information, I'll drop that in the chat as well.
Great, great. So the commission really wants to hear from all of you. So I do encourage you to take the time to share your feedback, either in written form or at the public hearing on November 3rd, or certainly both. And there you have more information about how to submit those comments. Questions about the administrative rules process? And like Colette said, don't be shy about getting in touch with us if you think of something. So, quick update about federal funding. The big question mark right now is just the federal shutdown. what we know is that should not impact us and our ability to support you. We work closely with IMLS and follow their best practices for making sure that we are able to still get the funding that we need to do our work during the shutdown. And then should the shutdown linger for far longer than any of us want it to, we'll be working closely with the governor's budget office here within state government to understand how we can move forward with the resources that we need to continue to support you. So we don't really anticipate that we will be impacted by the federal shutdown. It does, of course, mean that Congress is not working to pass an FY26 budget. You're all listening to the same news I am. We expect that to end the shutdown, Congress will come up with some kind of continuing resolution for funding. Continuing resolutions typically mean that we would then have level funding for the period of time that the continuing resolution is in effect. So typically those are anywhere from 6 weeks to three or 4 months as Congress continues to negotiate a budget. At some point, we hope that Congress will actually pass a federal FY26 budget, and both the Senate and the House Appropriations Committees are recommending level funding for IMLS. President Trump's budget calls for the orderly shutdown of IMLS. That's not new. That was certainly expected. And so we were very, very pleased that both the Senate and the House are proposing essentially level funding for IMLS and the Grants to States program. Congress has to work to negotiate a final budget. The House and Senate would work together to reconcile any differences in their budget. But I feel very cautiously optimistic that if and when Congress passes an FY26 budget, we should have at least level funding for IMLS and the Grants to States program going forward. And based on what we've gone through over the last several months, I think that's just really fantastic. Other activities within IMLS give us confidence that things seem to be returning to normal. IMLS staff, prior to the shutdown, were planning to attend some meetings of state librarians. I doubt that that will happen, but we were really glad that they were thinking about being able to join us. IMLS is starting to award more grants, and they have awarded up to 3-year grants. So they're obviously seeing some longevity for the agency into the future. That's great news for us. We know that the tribal college libraries received their basic grants this year, which is fantastic news for the tribal college libraries in Montana. Some of you will remember that those grant funds were lost in the spring. And then IMLS is planning to hold an in-person conference for state library staff in the spring. So all of those things give us confidence that things appear to be returning to normal. And that's a great relief to all of us. Some of you may know that the IMLS authorization legislation has now sunset. It was due to be reauthorized this summer prior to the end of September. It's unusual for that legislation to have sunset, but in the end, it doesn't necessarily have any impact on IMLS, their work, or their future. There are many, many, many federal programs that don't have authorizing legislation. Some of them have not had authorizing legislation for years. It does lend some weight to have that authorizing legislation. However, the library community, working with members of Congress, just felt like this summer was not the right time to be calling attention and shining a spotlight on IMLS and the fact that their authorizing legislation was due to sunset. So we are working with members of Congress to make sure that when the time is right, we will again address a bill that would reauthorize IMLS. For now, simply appropriating funds by Congress does give IMLS the authorization they need to continue to operate. So I don't want anybody to be concerned by the fact that IMLS authorizing legislation has now sunset. Questions about the federal funding situation? And then, we're tracking some changes with Baker and Taylor, our very, very long time partner. Gosh, I remember my first jobs in libraries, the Baker and Taylor poster with Baker and Taylor, the library cats, plastered around the libraries. I'm sure many of you remember the very same posters. So it did come as kind of a surprise this week to learn that Baker and Taylor is looking to close in January of 2026. As a company, we knew that they had been struggling for a few years. Some of you might remember that we used to rely on Baker and Taylor to help administer the public library survey, the statistics that you submit to all of us. And Rebecca very wisely recommended that we seek a change a few years ago, which we did do. So we at the state library shouldn't be impacted by these changes, but we do know that a lot of libraries rely on Baker and Taylor to build your collections. You have standing orders with Baker and Taylor. We've received information from other states about what those changes mean for those libraries that rely on Baker and Taylor for your collection development. What we believe we understand is that they are only filling orders with anything that they have in stock in their warehouse. So if any of you have orders for books that are back ordered or expected to come in at a later date, we believe that those orders are being canceled by Baker and Taylor. So that's something for people to be aware of and looking into. Communication is still somewhat fluid, and so we'll continue to provide more information as we learn it. The shared catalog staff have started working with some libraries to transition from Baker and Taylor to Ingram already. And so if you're a library that's in the shared catalog and use the acquisitions module and need to make that change, please do submit a ticket with the shared catalog staff. And then, even if you're not in the shared catalog, if you rely on Baker and Taylor and have concerns or are looking for information about how to move forward in the absence of Baker and Taylor, that's a conversation that the state library is very happy to facilitate. So just let us know if it can be useful to any of you, for us to pull together a meeting of librarians to talk about what the future looks like without Baker and Taylor. I have Rebecca with us in case there's any questions about the public library survey that's currently open. Just a reminder that the deadline to complete that survey is November 28th. And I know Rebecca's been fielding quite a few questions. As always, feel free to reach out to her. She is here with us today. If anybody has any questions, or Rebecca, if there's anything you feel like you want to share with the group.
The one thing I wanted to share is, like last year, we have a dashboard online that's tracking survey progress. So I'll share that in the chat if you're curious about what it looks like in your region of the state as far as survey completion goes. That's where to look. And it also is where I keep track of how many questions we have coming in and how much time is spent on different activities related to public library survey.
Thanks, Rebecca. Any questions for Rebecca? I feel so bad for those states that rely on Baker and Taylor to do this survey. They are scrambling. And so I'm just very, very grateful that we're not in that position, and for Rebecca and her leadership to make sure that that's the case. Just a few other important dates that you might want to note for your calendar, some upcoming trainings. Again, reminders about the public hearing and the deadline for submitting public comments. The next business meeting of the State Library Commission is December 10th. Again, that's when we're going to be taking action on any changes to those administrative rules. Also on the agenda for that meeting is a presentation from the Historical Society about the Montana 250th Commission. So if you're interested in learning more about their work, you've probably been seeing the announcements about the book club offerings that they're recommending. Tune into the December 10th commission meeting. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about anything we talked here today or anything else that might be on your mind. And as always, please feel free to take our evaluation survey so we can continue to improve how we serve all of you. You're welcome to share any questions or comments in the chat, unmute yourself. We're happy to hang out for just a few minutes if that helps you. And Colette, why don't you go ahead and stop the recording?
Sounds good.